First and foremost, giving all honor and praise to the creator of the heavens and the earth. We thank him for his prophets, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Yeshua, Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah. But if we thank him for those well-deserving men and prophets of the Most High, peace be upon them, we must thank him for our modern-day leaders and inspirations. From Ben Ami HaMashiach, Nasi Shaliach, Prince Asiel Ben Israel, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his great student, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and all the ancestors in whatever form or fashion they may be found. And all those who are watching and listening now, I greet you in the words of peace. Shalom, shalom. Welcome back to another episode of Reality Check TV, where we, as in me in most cases, but sometimes we're going to have some guests, like to take different topics that really have a little buzz in the media, but give a thorough understanding and analysis on what's really going on and the truth behind it, and not the propaganda that has been presented before us as an excuse to create a false narrative about whatever the situation or subject matter that the media wants to twist in their own benefit and in their own favor. So we try to do our best by presenting the subject matter with the truth only, and we try to cut away all the deception, lies, and manipulation that has been presented to us as a people. So today I got this episode is usually a little late. We try to get done Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the latest. This is done a couple days later because it was such a hectic weekend and I wasn't able to get it in. But I was not going to go without at least doing something that kind of chronicalizes and keeps this momentum going. And also I wanted to talk about, most people talked about, so I'm not going to go too much in depth there, but the death of Fidel Castro. And for me, this is a subject that I think is important for numerous reasons. One is because it shows how America and the Western media machine uses, after so many examples of how they can take a figure who does not play by their rules and not play ball with them and use them to create a false narrative, like we said previously, to sway public opinion in the direction and the favor which they want to promote whatever agenda that they are trying to push. And Fidel Castro is a great example of that, and we have so many numerous others. But since his passing, and you see the celebration and the celebratory emotions that is coming out of South Florida, Miami in particular, in the cities of Little Havana, or the town of Little Havana, where those Cuban dissidents who left Cuba in the sense of facing persecution and long suffering and all those things, and came to America to get a better so-called life and to create a better reality for their families, celebrates the death of Fidel Castro and how they say that he was a destroyer of families and just a terrible dictator who gave them no freedom and left them under total tyranny the whole time of his rule. But I don't think that's always true. For me personally, whenever the media presents any entity, person, male or female, group, as such a monster and such an opposer of justice, equality, and freedom, in most cases it's usually the opposite. Because we have to realize that this media machine, which is America and the Western powers, create not just enemies, but create a narrative around these so-called polarized figures to push their own agenda. And I keep saying this because I really want us to understand that when we read about certain figures throughout history, from just the perspective of what the America media outlets write about them or say about them, we're left with an incomplete picture. And we can never understand the totality of their impact and what they really stood for, and also the agenda that is being pushed on us, so that we can always have a false idea of what freedom is and how freedom should be attained. Because this is the same system that said Malcolm X was a bigot, was a hater, was a racist, so-called black supremacist. one who did more damage to the people of African descent in America than he did help. We also know that J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI, former FBI director, and the head of the COINTELPRO, called Martin Luther King Jr. the greatest hypocrite America has ever seen. Called Marcus Garvey the greatest threat America has ever seen. So when they, in present day, say Minister Louis Farrakhan is an anti-Semite, is a bigot, is a manipulator of people, is a misogynist. I'm just saying, so whenever they paint these pictures, and countless other, all our leaders, they've done this with. Whenever they do that, it's because it's most cases, if not all cases, quite the contrary. Because they don't play ball with America in the way they want them to be, present their narrative and what they feel they should be doing with their lives. So whenever you go against the establishment, whenever you fight against oppression, systematic and systemic oppression, you become an enemy of the state. And whenever you become an enemy of the state, that's when the propaganda comes the hardest. And that's when they start pumping these false narratives. That's when they start pumping this deception and this misrepresentation of so many great men and women. Now, was Fidel Castro the ideal man? Who is? But the way that they painted the picture of him is one that is totally false. And I'm saying us, we have to look at this in a whole nother way, because they want us to be drawn in to their idea of what men who want to acquire their freedom should be. Women who want to acquire their freedom should be. Because ultimately, if you're the slave master, if you're the one who is doing the subjugation, you want the people who are subservient to you to stay subservient to you. So those who break ranks, those who try to acquire and have acquisition of their freedom, fall victim of being demonized, ostracized, and criticized at the highest levels. So that's why this is so imperative that you do your research and you listen to other, not just opinions and perceptions, but other facts and truths that are being presented about certain men and women who have been presented to us as evil. Back to Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro, the former prime minister and president of the island of Cuba, which was an island for most of its inception after it broke ranks from the Spanish-American War, was under American control. Here's how. After the Spanish-American War, when America so-called won that war with Spain, they were able to acquire the island of Cuba. And when they acquired this island, they knew that this was going to be not an island for those indigenous people who are already on there, not the Spaniards, nor the North American Anglo-Saxons, but those indigenous people of African descent who inhabited that land, who always faced the highest persecution no matter what. So when you see these Spanish-Cuban dissidents that's in Miami, protests and Fidel Castro's reign in power, or his regime under his regime over Cuba, and the celebration of his death, and they say they end to oppression in Cuba, you gotta look at it a different way, because his idea of freedom and their idea of freedom are two distinctly different things. Their idea of freedom is not freedom for all people, it's freedom for themselves and their kind, those who look and represent the ideals that they have. And we all understand that, especially European Spanish, which is one of the major players in the transatlantic slave trade, along with Portugal, and don't forget other Western European countries along America, but they were at the forefront. Spain was the one who backed Columbus and coming to America and allowed him to do the monstrous and total hellish atrocities that he committed on the island of Hispaniola, which is present-day Haiti and Dominican Republic. Let's look at this another way. So that mentality never left the sentiment of the people, so that through the blood of the generations was passed on and passed on and passed on to hate. So when they was being introduced into a Cuba that was not based on the ideals of white supremacy, they automatically rejected. When they were introduced into a Cuba that was not based on the promotion of drugs, gambling, prostitution, total decadent behavior, illicit behavior, they totally rejected and found it oppressive. Hear this out now. Their idea of freedom is one that allows you to do all the things which brings total demise, not to the morality just of the country, but the very fabric of a country. And so that's why America fought so hard to introduce its so-called principles or its ideas of democracy and capitalism into the fabric of African indigenous nations, Asiatic nations, South American nations, so that they can control the narrative. And now you're introducing people to rampant, free-fall, sexual deviancy. You're introducing them to drug abuse. You're introducing them to a total decay of the family structure. Now you're able to control and enslave the population of the people willingly, because the population and the populace become willing participants in their own subjugation. So Fidel Castro, this is critical. He came into power in 1958. He was prime minister from 1958 to around 1976. And then around 1776 he became the president, all the way in 2006 to he had some health problems which he was able to pass on his presidency to his brother Raul Castro. But Fidel Castro was a son of a wealthy Spanish immigrant from Spain who came into Cuba around the early 1900s, and was a very wealthy man because he was in bed with an American company at the time called United Fruit. United Fruit, if you do your research, was one of the major corporations at the time who took full advantage of the manipulation and the control of the indigenous people of South America and the Caribbean. Now, United Fruit played a major role in the decimation of Jamaica, of the island of Haiti, of Venezuela, and all of these South American Caribbean islands, parts of Mexico, all those. Panama, because they were rooted in profit and gains overall, and not just profit and gains which contribute to exponential growth in monetary value, but also the control over the people and the resources of that land. We can never forget this. The real economic wealth of nations is the energy of the people that inhabit or participate in that nation. So when you understand that, you understand why is it such an attack on the minds of the people of a government, of the people of a nation, of the children, is because you keep them in control and compliant, and most importantly, complacent in a system that is centered around their enslavement. Give them illusion of inclusion, which totally makes them feel like they're a part of something that they have no control over at all. Not the very fabric of how their lives are to be handled. These are things that the powers, the so-called powers that be, take full advantage of. And because of our inability to realize the truth of the matter and to continue to fall for deceptive reasoning, deceptive agendas that promote this false narrative, it keeps us not just separate, but contentious against each other. Hear me out. Back to Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro was a son, like I said, of a wealthy Spaniard who had ties with the United Fruit Corporation Company, who raised his children a certain type of way because they were outside of the so-called city life of the island and was raised in more of a rural area. So when he started to send them to the better or the higher end schools of Cuba, there was always some resistance. There was always some type of situations where they didn't fit or they were too rowdy, too rough. And because of that, it started to build a certain character in the Castro boys, especially Fidel, because he seen that the children of means had a different disposition from everybody else because it was instilled from their parents that they were better than everybody else, and he never really liked that type of mentality. And so for years he fought against the government. He was imprisoned. I'm not going to really get his life story. It'll take a long time to really break down, but I just want to give you an idea of what Fidel Castro represented versus the false narrative that was presented on him. And when you look at the reality of things, when the current leader, by the time Fidel Castro was in his college years and really became a revolutionary in his own sense, Batista, who was a puppet implant of America, who kept the island flowing with some of the most notorious criminals from America. The mafia, the mobsters, guys like Lucky Luciani and Meyer Lansky and these guys who took the La Cosa Nostra and infiltrated or was trying to infiltrate Cuba and bring in illicit behavior, corruption, prostitution, drug abuse, casinos, an island that they would fully take advantage of their natural resources, their sugar plantations, and all the other resources they produce, and use it as a place to get rich quick screen, not really taking into consideration none of the lives of the inhabitants who were already on that island. It was a getaway for the wealthy of America to come down there, have sex with the native women, gamble, get drunk, get high, do all these immoral things that America pretty much promotes today, that we all, us, the country, participates in some form or fashion, to have these mental escapes to elude the very problems that are being promulgated on us as a people. So when you look at the situation, Fidel Castro had a major problem with this because he's seen his country not just being manipulated, but fully taken advantage of, and that was something he could not stand for. So he took this reality and fought back. Got exiled into Mexico, got a crew over in Mexico, built up his own little army, returned back to Cuba. When he landed there, Batista had his army waiting for him. He was pushed up into the mountains, the Sierra Maestra, if I'm pronouncing it right, mountains, where he was basically condemned to death because nobody survives in those mountains. But he had something that a lot of us lack. He had a resolve. And because of his resolve, he was able to not just survive the onslaught and the attack of the military that was already awaiting him, but the elements. And he was able to live off the land. He had conviction. Him and his brothers, Che Guevara, and a lot of other brothers that stood with him, was able to build a coalition of those who were also unhappy with the way Cuba was being taken advantage of at the time, and their people were being manipulated and abused. And they built their own army of guerrilla warriors and was able to overthrow Batista. Now, here's the irony. 1959, by the time he got power, 1960, when Fidel Castro came to America, he was received with parades in Washington, D.C. He was given a red carpet by the head of the Central Intelligence Agency at the time, the Dulles brother, Allen Dulles, who, and also other heads of states, Department of Defense and those guys at the time, who thought they were going to be able to use Fidel Castro in the same fashion that they had Batista. Because if say, okay, well, he says he wants those things now, but if we offer him ultimately the world and what they like to present, then he's going to take the bait. So he came like he was going to hear him out and so forth and so on. But he didn't take the bait. He didn't deal with America like they thought he was going to deal with. He didn't really participate in the manner which they want him to participate, by being their puppet, giving him some wealth, but taking full advantage of the island of Cuba and implementing all the policies that they wanted to implement in Cuba. So I'm citing these examples because this is the same thing they've done in America with us as a people. Even though we don't have a nation here in America, anytime we have organizations, anytime we have any type of movements, anytime we have any type of uprisings, from the times of Marcus Garvey all the way to the so-called Black Lives Matter movement, it's been totally infiltrated and compromised so that it does nothing that's beneficial for our people. Hear this out. These are the same tactics they've been using since their inception. The same thing they use in Africa, on the continent of Africa, throughout Asia, throughout the Isles of the Pacific, through the Caribbean, through South America, Central America. The same tactics, and we're not waking up to them. But Brother Fidel Castro met with Brother Malcolm, met with other heads of state, black heads of states, and built a bond with those brothers, which was good because you would see through his tenure in power in Cuba, the 47 years that he was in power, 50 years really, but 47 from him being prime minister to president, he helped other African nations, from Angola, Ethiopia, to South Africa. So he did help revolutions. He did help participate. He invested back into his country because America put sanctions on Cuba and did no trade embargoes and wouldn't do any type of trade with them because of his alliance with the Soviet Union at the time, which was President Russia. And also they falling out, but I'm not going to get into the details of that, but he created a system where he taught his people how to be self-sufficient, self-governed, self-sustainable. Invested in the educational system, invested in healthcare, created an island full of engineers and architects, doctors. This is what he implemented. And I'm citing these examples not to uplift Fidel Castro, because he did some question things as well. You know, I never, even though Guantanamo Bay is off the coast of Cuba, it's still on Cuba, and how he allowed that American base, jail, whatever you want to call it, be in proximity with his island. So there's some suspect things that he participated in. But I'm saying overall, he was learning on the job. So he might have had some compromising down the road. Who knows? After the 638 attempts on his life that they wrote a documentary on, or made a documentary on, maybe one of them did work and it was somebody else in there. I know I'm going a little too heavy with that. I don't want to get too much, scare you away. But they use body doubles. There's been many cases where known people who have died, they put body double in to keep them going, to keep on the front. And we think that these are the men and women that were originally in power or in place who were supplanted by a body double because they were actually assassinated, killed, or in jail. But I'm not about to get too conspiracy theory on you right now. But I'm just letting you know that's always a reality that we have to really consider. You keep thinking because it don't make sense to you or because you wouldn't do it that the enemy won't do it. But when you have a world that's built on deception, you have to use all means of deception to keep it going. Especially when the truth is keep being put out there, even by themselves, because they got to a point they become so arrogant, they'll let you know the truth. But you're not going to do nothing with it, so they see it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a difference. But these are the things that we have to take into consideration. Fidel Castro was able to build a reality in Cuba that allowed him to empower his people, educate his people without the influence. This is the key. Without the influence of the outside world. And you can call that a dictator. You can call that a tyrant. But you can also call that a visionary. You can also call that a freedom fighter, a true evolutionary who participated in his own freedom and did not compromise his beliefs, his morals, and his ideals. So which one do you want to be? Which one do you want to leave as a legacy for your children? You gotta wake up. We have to come to the realization that if you don't do for self, you're never gonna be free. If you're gonna separate from the reality of this total, devious, devilish society, you're always gonna be a hypocrite and evil yourself. Whenever you base your decision on the lesser of two evils, that means you have evil in you. That was the coined term during this past 2016 election between Hillary, Rodham Clinton, Donald J. Trump, was that the lesser of two evils. So you still accept evil. You're saying out of your own mouth that these two candidates are evil, yet your ideal choice or the choice that you decide to pursue is one still rooted in evil. Think about that. We've totally been eradicated from life and righteousness altogether that we say it is okay to be evil. It's just how much evil you choose to perpetuate. But you keep calling on God. You keep saying that you're the children of God. That you're God-fearing, God-loving, God-serving people. Yet your choices are totally contrary. Your choices are totally embedded in wickedness. So I'm not going to go too much longer. I just wanted to say that. I'm going to come back later on this week. And we're really going to probably break some stuff down. Because there's so much stuff I want to talk about from this week, even though I got started late in the week. But I just wanted to touch it on Fidel Castro. Like I said, there's so much information I can really break down. And I usually like to go really in depth and give thorough analysis on what's happening. But I just wanted to use Fidel Castro. Not that I was giving a biography on his life and really break, but I want to just use some examples on how we participate in false narratives and propaganda, which lead us as the pathway to our own death, to our own destruction. That's what we do every single day, that we continue to reject truth and accept lies. It's going to be a matter of time, if you stand up for truth and righteousness, that the picture is going to be painted well. He did this or he did that. He wasn't. Because those who go opposite of this reality that is, or this construct of America, is always going to be considered an enemy of the state. Always. And even when they use our leaders like Malcolm and Martin and other men like that, they try to romanticize them now, but they dead. You killed them. Now you want to tell us they were good men? Now you want to tell us that they had good plans and that you promote their message? We said it wasn't us. That happened 50 years ago. That happened to... No, that was you. Because the same system is still killing our leaders today. The same people that killed Fred Hampton is the same people that's killing anybody who represents truth. And even if you don't kill them in a physical death, you try to kill their credibility. Try to kill their character. And you totally create an environment where their progeny and their children can never have a place to grow that's respectable and admirable, that reflects the mind of a free man, but only reflects the mind of a slave that is totally subservient to his slave master. Wake up. This has been a reality check. I want to thank those for watching. Thank all those who came before me, who gave me position and give me the platform which to speak from. I want to thank all those who dedicate their life and their service to the upliftment and the freedom of the people of this earth. And may you look at these messages and hear these words and be proactive with it. We are totally past the part and past the point where we just acquire knowledge just to say we know something. If you don't apply it in a manner that is beneficial for the freedom of the people of this planet, you participate in the enslavement of it. Leave y'all in the words of peace and the smooth sounds of a Commodore. Shalom, shalom.